Hi, welcome to our preview of Modern Foundations in Vedic Astrology. I'm Barry Rosen. Glad you could join us on this Sunday morning. We'll probably go, I've scheduled an hour and a half. Hopefully, we may even be done in less time today. What we're hoping to do today is just share some deeper points about Vedic astrology. My foundations class is much richer and deeper than most people I know that teach it. I'm not trying to teach you just a lot of rules, although of course we need to learn them. We need to understand kind of deeper archetypal and psychological patterns. So that's what, and some of the deeper philosophy of Vedic astrology is something that I will be sharing with you. Um, I'm going to go to full screen here. Um, and so um, here's my contact information. Um, I can be reached, my office manager can be reached at that phone number almost all the time. You can email me at barry2appliedvedicastrology.com. Facebook texting works, and I have a number of Facebook sites, and my website, appliedvedicastrology.com. Um, I I usually with this new setup on GoToWebinar, it is easier for people to take the mic and ask questions. Um, I will have a chance probably at the end for questions to happen, um, but I'm not quite sure. Once in a while, I'll pause in the middle and take questions. Um, if you take classes from me, I always send the PowerPoints ahead of time for you to study, and you always get them after class. And for people who take the class, if you send me your birth data, I will use your chart as examples for whatever we're studying that day. So I do make it very personal, and that's up to you. Some people don't want to share their charts. Um, all our classes are always recorded, including this one for replay. So if you miss a class or you can't attend, you can always watch the replay. They're sent um, automatically within 2 hours by GoToWebinar, and I personally resend them within a day. The moment our first live class is scheduled for Wednesday, June the 24th at 2 p.m. I know that's a work period for a lot of people. I have a lot of people that are retired or live in the United Kingdom. Is if there was like a huge uh, gathering of people who would like to have the class Sunday at 9 a.m., which is a little bit early for the West Coast, it's possible I may be able to switch to that. Again, here's my contact information. Let me a little bit about myself. I've been involved in Vedic astrology since 1987. I've been teaching classes of all kinds for about 10 years. I started out teaching financial astrology classes in 1992 even, but I've been teaching uh, I call them boutique classes in Vedic astrology. I mean, I teach specialized classes on Saturn and the moon and Rahu and Ketu and secrets of the houses and very advanced specialized courses. So if you decide to, this is the first time I'm teaching the foundation class since 2019 and wanting to gather another group of students. I've put a number of students through 6 years of study with me, and all those courses are available whenever you need advanced studies. Introduction to all those courses are on my YouTube channel, appliedvedicastrology.com, and so you can always look there. I'm also the author of 5 books on Vedic astrology, and they're also on YouTube. Um, this is my last book, Finding Your Blind Spots Using Astrology. It's a very deep book that really a lot of what we'll talk about today is connected to that. It's really trying to find the spiritual, psychological, emotional wisdom underlying Vedic astrology. I don't like to make Vedic astrology, I don't want to be a fortune teller. I don't want to turn my students into fortune tellers. Like prediction can be useful. We'll talk about that today. And we do need it in financial astrology, but and for mundane and predictions. And everybody loves predictions, but there are some flaws with prediction, which we'll look at today. I usually start with some Vedic chanting. Om Ganeshaya Namaha, Om Ganeshaya Namaha, Om Ganeshaya Namaha, Om Ganapatiye Namaha, Om Ganapatiye Namaha, Om Ganapatiye Namaha, Vakritunda Mahakaya, Suryakoti Samaprapa, Nirvigam Karame Deva Sarvakaresha Sarvada Dhyanamulam Guru Murti Pujamulam Guru Padam Mantramulam Guru Vakyam Mokshamulam Guru Kripa Om Asatoma Sadgamaya Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya Mrichoma Amritam Gamaya Om Shanti 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 Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karvavahai Tejasvina Vatitamastu Ma Vivishai Om Shanti 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 Om Aditya Samaye Mangale Buddhaya Cha Guru Shukra Shani Bishara Have Ketave Namaha. Honoring the great ones, Lord Krishna, Goddess Saraswati, Vedavyasa, and all my spiritual teachers. Honoring all my great Jyotish teachers, including Sanjay Roth, Camilla Sutton, and Bill Levacy. And we have some people enrolled in the class. They may be here today. The class is about 16 weeks at the moment. It's scheduled to start June 24th from 2 to 4 p.m. Here's kind of the information is on our websites. Again, when I teach things, I'm going to teach them, even if you know Vedic astrology, people, you will get a lot of depth from my class because I teach all my courses with depth. So the next lesson on signs and depth, the Achilles heel of each sign, is something, it's not just learning about the signs like Western astrology. It's really learning the archetypes of the signs and the problems of the signs. For example, Gemini rising has Venus owning the 5th and the 12th, and they desire female companionship all the time, but they're often thwarted because Venus also owns the 12th. So there's kind of like a relationship addiction and frustration with relationships that develops just because of the way the planets and the houses are involved. I'll have a quick overview in lesson 3 of houses and the evolution of the soul. So, it's one thing to learn the first house is the self, and the second house is money, and the third house is, I have a whole in-depth course on this, but the progression of the houses actually shows the evolution of the soul. And so that's how we'll kind of cover it in more depth. So those of you who know Vedic astrology would be learning on a deeper level. So anyway, you can, the website has some of this information. I'm updating this class, but okay, so other information, but let's get into today's talk. Okay, I'm going to go. Okay, so the name of my Vedic Astrology Institute is called Modern Foundations of Vedic Astrology, because I find that a lot of my Indian teachers, and I've studied with many, they use all these Sanskrit terms, Baba and Baba Suchika and all these, and when we hear these Vedic terms, the Western mind turns off. So I always even make a point of retranslating all the Vedic terms into English, even if sometimes they don't have an English translation. But I think that's important, getting this information. So today's, when I teach Vedic astrology, the first lesson is actually the first lesson. It's kind of, I call it the ocean in a drop. It's kind of an overview today of why study Vedic astrology for your personal development. And the course, by the way, is $395, which is extremely reasonable. I will be teaching Foundations 2 and 3 also. But most of my colleagues charge $1,800 or more for a year of study in Vedic astrology, and I, mine comes out much less. I realize people have budgets, and I have other income from my financial forecasting business. So this is my passion, so I don't have to charge, an arm and a leg. But for those of you who need payment plans, our website, when you check out on Stripe, you can choose Klarna, which allows you to set up your own payment plan. Sometimes you can do 2 or 3 payments. Sometimes you can do 18 payments. So people often need payments, and that can be set up through Klarna. If you have trouble with Klarna, you can also email me, and I can do it through a PayPal invoice. But for the most part, most people have credit cards, and it's easier to take care of it at once. So key differences between Vedic and Western astrology, and that's connected to the idea that the zodiac progresses. So there may have been a time 20,000 years ago when the sun went into Aries at springtime on March 20th, but the sun now goes into Aries from a scientific point of view on April 13th, 14th. And so there is a value in the tropical zodiac. I've learned a lot from Western astrologers. The Western zodiac is very connected to the seasons in that sense. There are values in it. I learn a lot from them, but it's very bad for prediction because it's off by 23 to 24 degrees. Vedic astrology has always been better for prediction than Western astrology. Western astrology only has kind of transits and progressions. Vedic astrology has the dasha system, which we learn at some point in Foundations 2, I think. And again, it's the oldest form of astrology. It's over 10,000 years old. It was cognized by ancient rishis who recorded the laws of time and space and karma. I like to think that Vedic astrology is not about fortune telling. I know, if you go online, if you go listen to the radio, they're advertising the California psychic line. I don't. My intuition's very good. I'm very good at prediction. I don't think we should devolve Vedic astrology into fortune telling. And it's not that I don't teach prediction, and it can be valuable, but there are so many factors that are involved, and I'll explain that a little bit later today. I like to think of Vedic astrology as a spiritual and psychological technique, answering core questions. Why am I here on the planet? I'm developing a whole new program for life purpose this summer, and going to be doing advanced work for executives on that. Why am I suffering? Usually the biggest reason people come to me for a consultation is they're suffering. They have a health problem, they have a problem with their relationship. And certainly we can see that in the chart. And the other core question is, how can I get out of suffering? Well, but I am teaching a class this summer on remedies, both from a Western perspective and a traditional Vedic perspective. And most people don't want to chant mantras or go to the temple and do a puja. So I've developed a whole series of Western-oriented solutions to get people out of suffering. But that's, basically, we all suffer. And the goal of our existence is to move beyond suffering and to move toward enlightenment and be off the wheel of karma. And that's a lifetime journey. Core question of Vedic astrology: how can I lead a better life? I like to think of Vedic astrology. There's a movie that very inspires me, Groundhog Day, with Bill Murray. It was made in 1993. It was written by a Zen practitioner, and he actually directed it. And the movie is kind of, most of you remember the movie. It's about a boorish weather forecaster who gets stuck in Puxatawny, Pennsylvania, waking up every day to the alarm clock, and he can't seem to get out of his nightmare. And initially he starts going to the diner and eating piles of food, and then he tries to drive his car off the cliff, and he does everything to kind of get rid of his pain and nightmare of being stuck reliving the same Groundhog Day. And then eventually he evolves into becoming a kinder person. He learns the piano, he rescues people, he becomes a model citizen for the community. And to me, it's kind of a metaphor of our many lives. How many lifetimes do we have to go to move beyond our ego, beyond our relationship patterns? And eventually, it is a movie about relationship, and he eventually wins the girl, Andy McDowell. But I do find the movie very inspiring. And I've developed I'll talk about it later, a model for Vedic astrology based on evolutionary astrology, and that the idea of that movie. I differ from a lot of other Vedic astrologers, is that, I've studied with these Indian teachers, and you start hearing Bhava and Drishti and Rashi and Bhava Suchika and Atmakarika, and you start kind of, the mind gets turned off. So I always translate everything into English. That's why I call it modern Vedic astrology. And my approach to Vedic astrology is more spiritual and psychological than predictive. I think Vedic astrology is about self-development and helping others see their unconscious patterns. I think that's the highest realm. I mean, in ancient times, the Pundit tradition would try to predict the future and do Vedic ceremonies to prevent problems from happening, or they were like the village doctor, and you'd come in with a problem and they would do a Vedic ceremony. So there is a value in knowing the future, but I find that spiritual people are more aware, and they're more grounded in the I mean, they have more free will. Sometimes I get people from India coming to me for readings and saying, "What does the chart say?" You know, they feel very fated, like they can't move beyond their chart. And then I seem to attract a lot more spiritual people who are open to hearing, yeah, there are these tendencies coming up in the future. You're going to be put through the school of relationship with the planets hitting certain key areas of your chart and the cycles creating certain things. But does it mean you're going to get a divorce? Or are you going to work through it this time because you've got new skills to not make the same mistake? So I like to think that spiritual people have a better chance and don't have to be fated. The other thing about how I differ from other Vedic astrologers, I'm very available for email questions. I check my email almost every 15 minutes, and people are amazed that I answer their questions within 15 minutes rather than 5 days later. I'm very accessible. My work is very clear and simplified. Again, I've been studying Vedic astrology. I've been teaching Vedic astrology now for 10 years. Always, in my forte is really teaching. I used to teach college literature. I've taught meditation and yoga techniques for years, and so I've been very my favorite thing is in the world is teaching, and that's why I do it. I also have a rich lineage of very different teachers. I've studied with Mark Boney, Camilla Sutton, Sanjay Roth, Visti Larson, and many others. And I learn a little bit from everyone, and I bring them into my class. So the problem in our life is the mind. You know, it's really the mind, and that's why the Vedic astrologers think the moon is the most important planet, because, you know, the moon is our mind and our heart and our emotions. And when, you know, sometimes you can get a job promotion and everything's going great in your life on a material level, but your mind is tormenting you with I'm not good enough, or I'm not confident, or why is this happening to me? So we ultimately have to kind of understand the nature of the mind in Vedic astrology through the moon, and we have a whole lesson on that. But and you know, I think ultimately, I'd like to, because I've been a spiritual teacher for 50 years, I like to bring spirituality into my classes. Um, you know, for example, most spiritual teachers teach that we just have to be in the present moment. And most of us regret the past, and we're always studying, why did this happen to me in the past, and what's going to happen in the future, and then we're out of the present moment. Enlightenment is in the present moment. Now, it doesn't mean it's not important to heal the past, or it's not useful to have an understanding of the future, but ultimately we have to kind of grow in spirituality. My office manager a number of years ago had kind of a Vedanta moment where he had an 8-year-old kid, and you have an 8-year-old kid, they don't relate to you on an intellectual level, and you just have to connect with them on the heart. And he came into the office one day with, he was very challenged with being a single parent, and he said, I don't know what will happen, but I just know that I have to be there for my kid in the moment. It's kind of a beautiful testimony to, sometimes what kids do for us and what animals do for us. We can't relate to them on an intellectual level. We just have to be there in the moment with them. And implies I'm very practical. So, I mean, I teach classes on money karma and financial astrology, and all my classes are very practical because it's really about we got to live our life. We can't live our life, in this kind of crazy world of the mind. For example, Saturn troubles most people. I get so many people. Oh, I'm in Saudi Sat. I'm doomed. My life is going to be horrible for the next 7 years. That's not. Um, when I teach Saturn, we have a whole class on Saturn. Saturn's about moving into the present moment. Um, and that can happen in meditation. Saturn, usually creates a lot of fear of the future, and we actually have to kind of transcend that through meditation, breath work, and yoga. And those are remedies for Saturn, among other things. But if you're 100% in the moment, you're not thinking about what you will do. So, like when I used to teach yoga, I used to remind my students, don't think about what you're going to make for dinner. Don't think about how your boss yelled about you. Just be totally here in the moment in your body, experiencing your breath. And that's the secret of being in the moment. And Saturn teaches that sometimes. Now, overall, I'd like to think that, we get a lot of astrologers who, who get into doom and gloom. And we can't, in our current world, we can't not worry about that. And we are in a very kind of huge changing end of the decade. If you want to hear about that stuff, my Vedic, financial Vedic astrology magazine, which governs world affairs, is once a month on Thursdays at 2 p.m. and it's $99 for a subscription for 4 sessions. They're really in depth. I have 45 years experience in mundane astrology, and I do pay attention to it, and I think there are useful things to learn from it. At the same time, we can't live our life fearing being Chicken Little. Saturn's coming, it's hitting my ascendant, I'm doomed, I'm going to, live this awful life. And people who know a little astrology are particularly kind of struck in that. Jyotish, the Vedic word for Vedic astrology, means light. And it's the light of knowledge, which should free us from the group of thoughts and emotions. But we have to be aware and observe. So the purpose of Vedic astrology is to throw light on our crazy mind so we can see how the planets are pulling our puppet strings of emotions and thoughts, and then we can learn to observe them. Astrology should help us to understand all the ways our karma is impacting our emotional and mental world and how we can free ourselves from it. And when I was speaking at a conference, Andrew Frost was speaking, and astrology, he noted that astrology can settle the mind when there are problems. So people go to an astrologer to settle the mind. There's something when we get into a problem, we think it's going to go on forever, and I think a good astrologer can help us say, okay, this cycle's ending, this transit's ending next week, and I think things will shift. I had my first astrological reading in 1985 by Chakrapani Ulal, and he said, this difficult period is going to be ending next year, and your whole life is going to open up, and it did, and that's when I started studying Vedic astrology, 1986, 87. Sometimes the planets are like puppet strings. They kind of, if we don't know who's pulling the strings, it's usually the planets. Then we take it personally. We get into self-blame. We get angry. We blame ourselves rather than blaming Mars hitting our ascendant or something, or if we yell at somebody, that kind of thing, or if we have a bout of self-confidence, and we're not seeing that Saturn's hitting our sun or something. So in a sense, astrology is a spiritual technique that allows us to see the puppet strings of the planet, to free us from illusion and stuff like that. I feel like astrology has devolved into fortune telling. That's particularly true in India, and it's gotten rather rampant even in the United States. But on a deeper level, it was not really meant to do that. it's kind of like a jnana technique. A jnana technique is where we connect knowledge and experience to have an aha moment and to see something about our lives. So sometimes astrology can create a Zen observation that enlightens us to see that we're not our thoughts or our emotions or our ego. So usually, I don't know how many people are aware of it. Kant said, or one of the great philosophers said, "I think, therefore I am." Well, sometimes in enlightenment, you don't have any thoughts, and so thoughts are really not who we are. In fact, thoughts are kind of a lot of garbage. And Eckhart Tolle is very fond of saying that 99% of our thoughts are garbage, and yet we get caught up in the fear ones and the self-deprecation ones. We're not our emotions. Emotions are ever changing. The planets pull our emotional strings, and our ego is ever changing too. Our personality is really, we're kind of more like a river than we are. I study a lot of psychology. There's a famous Italian psychologist, Sidereal, who talked about subpersonalities. We're almost like 20 people inside. I'm a mystic financial analyst. I'm a husband. I'm scared of this, and we have all these little sub personalities, and none of them really exist. They're just we're really more of a flow, and we're much bigger than all those things that we think we are. And so Vedic astrology can help us see that and remove the bondage and the grip that treats us. For years, I've kind of, I started studying astrology, in the late 80s, and I would develop kind of a technique. I was, Sati Sat, when Saturn hits your moon, can create a lot of paralysis and emotional suffering. And I developed kind of a technique at that time, and I would just start talking to Saturn and say, Saturn, you can go now. And I suddenly felt like I freed myself of that grip. Now that sounds a little kind of mamby-pamby, but it kind of really worked, because the planets are actually here to serve us. They're not here to kind of torture us. And what that means is that we can command them. And one of my spiritual teachers used to say that we command the planets, actually. And ultimately, we have to learn how to be kinder to ourselves and not beat ourselves up as much. In a sense, that helps us own our own divinity. Our consciousness is much more powerful than planets, because divinity resides within us, and we lessen that greatness when we become a victim of the planet. So never, I get too many people going, woe is me. You don't have to kind of be a victim of the planets. We also have to kind of remember to move out of the mud. I have people talking about their charts, and they say, oh, I got a debilitated Saturn, I've got a debilitated Mars, and oh, my Mercury is afflicted by Saturn. And they kind of focus on all the difficult things in their chart, and that's also self-deprecatory. I mean, in fact, there are positive ways to look at anything in a chart. And so and I've often seen people with debilitated planets rise up to become really great individuals, because they work 3 times as hard to dig themselves out of the basement. And there's a lot of charts of very famous people that were born with major difficulties. Even Albert Einstein has a debilitated Mercury. The debilitation's canceled, but and it did show up later in life. I think when he developed dementia, but it's not. People kind of have a way of this. Sometimes our flaws are our greatest gifts. So we need to kind of understand that and move out of the mud. One of my spiritual teachers used to say, if you go, if you're camping and you go down to the lake at 6 o'clock in the morning, and sometimes you can see the bottom of the lake. Usually you can't, because it's muddy and people swim in it, and the waves start coming in. But sometimes you can just see the clear bottom, and then when you go into the lake, you stir up the mud, and the mud level settles down, and you can't see the bottom. And in a sense, no amount of psychological or spiritual practice sometimes can clear all the mud. He used to say mud is endless. I mean, if you know, can you really hook up a filtration plant to the lake and get rid of the mud and recycle it? I don't think so. But a spiritual guru can help you see the bottom of the pond and see who you are, and you can become the divinity of the pond and its wholeness. So sometimes we analyze our charts and our psychology to death, and I like doing that myself personally. We will do a lot of psychology in this class, but in the end, we have to move beyond the mud because mud is endless. I also want to move beyond astrological bypassing. My colleague Stephen Stuckey is a Vedic astrologer from Oregon, has suggested that it becomes less in transformational power. I mean, sometimes we get really obsessive about wanting to know the future and what's my Saturn period going to be like, and oh, Saturn's going into Aries, I'm doomed, you know, that kind of thing. And what he says is that when people become too focused on predicting events, such as anticipating the end of a difficult astrological transit, they may inadvertently reduce their full engagement with challenging experience. As a result, some of the intensity and surrender that can lead to a profound personal spiritual transformation may be diminished. Now, this is very profound. There's a wonderful book by, her name is Lesser, called Broken Open, and she's head of the Omega Institute in New York, and she's been sponsoring psychological and spiritual seminar people for 30 years, and she has an incredible wealth of wisdom. Wonderful book. But in Broken Open, it's kind of sometimes our greatest gifts in life are the most difficult times. Now, before I knew astrology, I went through a period in 1983 where I had 12 kidney stones in 12 months. And, you know, if you know how painful kidney stones are, it's, you know, the equivalent of a woman giving birth to a baby. And, uh, you know, it was one of the most difficult periods of my life. And um, when I look back at that period now, it was the biggest gift of my life. And it forced me to, my doctor said, okay, we can't do anything. You're going to be in pain the rest of your life. We got all these stones. And, you know, he gave up. And I, you know, I wasn't like that. I went to the library. I was a PhD student, and I found out I needed to take magnesium and it would dissolve the stones. And that started a career in alternative healing and medicine. And now I help a lot of people with whose doctors have given up on them because I have a whole catalog of things, you know, and people that they can go to for healing. Um, I also like to look at Vedic astrology as the planets are transmitters and we're kind of the receivers. So the planets are always strong. Sometimes the way it works now, the planets are like Mars is strongest at 28 degrees Capricorn. And that's where it has a real powerful signal. It's weakest at 28 degrees Cancer. So if you're born with and when we're born, it's almost like our system imprints the planets. They imprint the strengths and the weaknesses. So it's almost like in the old days of, you know, I'm dating myself here, of before in television, you know, in the 60s, you had tubes. And if you had a bad tube, you know, your TV reception never got better. Or then we moved to transistors. Now I guess it's chips. So I suppose there are chips that have flaws today. And if you have a bad chip, it just can't ever really do a job. So if we're born with during a weak planet, it's almost like our chips are not as functional. And even when the planet is strong, the chip is still defective and can't receive it. So, you know, there are ways to strengthen our chips, and that's certainly one of the things that we learn. But the point is that it's kind of like the planets are always transmitting and receiving. But if our chips are weak, then even when the planet's strong transmitting, we have a bad chip and we can't receive it. Bottom line, too, is that I think um, planets basically reflect and amplify our karma. They do not create it. So basically, of what karma we've chosen to work out in this lifetime, transits kind of come through to kind of teach us those lessons, like in Groundhog Day. Every difficult combination is teaching us something powerful. Like I said, my most difficult moments in life, like that year, taught me to self and not my moment, divorces, illnesses, financial crises. They actually often teach us a little bit of Jupiter is kind of Pollyanna-ish and naive. It's actually good for money. Jupiter is a spiritual planet. It's about religion and spirituality. In Capricorn, it's actually better for money and may be unethical in creating money, but it's ultimately good for something in that sense. So and people with Jupiter and Capricorn often are good in business. Capricorn is a business sign. So, there's always a positive way of looking at every combination. Um, and the higher or lower expression of how we look at it depends on our consciousness. And so I always encourage my students to practice meditation and develop consciousness. And that's a way of seeing the higher expressions. Um, our planets are very multidimensional. I have a whole lesson on YouTube about the multidimensional planets. I mean, they can predict the physical level, the emotional level, the mental level, the manifestation level in our environment. Um, in the Varga class I'm teaching now, we learn about the subtle bodies. They can show us the causal body and the astral body, and they can show us ancestral karma. The D60 chart in the Vargas can show us everything about all the karma we've inherited from all our lifetimes. So it's a storehouse. So Vedic astrology is this incredible storehouse, encyclopedic, and in fact, I always tell people we can study. People feel frustrated studying Vedic astrology because it's um, seems kind of endless. Um, but um, a good astrologer helps you see your Maya and blind spots, and I have a whole book on that. Ultimately, I think I want astrology to move us beyond fear, and I find these forecasts of people getting on about the end of the world being kind of disturbing. There are people that do well in difficult times. If we're here to help people, and we're always going to be taken care of. Um, Prediction is useful, um, but there's this thing, Shiva's curse, that even the best astrologers can only be 75% right, because there's always some level of free will. I like to think that astrology brings up um, these schools, and I have a class on that, the schools of karma. And um, these schools are kind of, if you're in the Venus school, maybe you're learning about relationships, or about sexuality, or the senses, or materiality, and things like that. But we always are given kind of free will to make new choices, and the school comes up and the lessons come up, but are we going to be victimized, or are we going to make new choices because we see our patterns? So I really think Vedic astrology is a spiritual technique to free us. So summary of some of the points we just went over. Have to learn to witness our mind more. Vedic astrologer, if we know, okay, my columns, for those of you who read them, are about giving a weather report so that you're not blaming yourself when you're angry. It's, Mars is out there causing problems. But, it also helps us observe the formation of our thoughts. Like if you, I'm going to see this now. I mean, I see the stars every day. And when I catch myself, if I'm feeling depressed or crazy or some level, and I know it'll be gone in a day or two with the transit. So it helps us cut the puppet strings that tug at our emotions. It releases self-blame. Center, we always kind of blame ourselves. We can't let go of it. I did that mistake again. We have to kind of learn to kind of not beat ourselves up. It's really not very useful. Saturn likes to do that until we say, Saturn, you can go now. Again, Jyotish means light, so it's supposed to kind of bring light to the darkness. Astrology should never strike fear into us. The more we meditate, the less we're gripped by the planets, and it's a Gyan technique to move beyond experience and observe the mind to gain freedom. Okay. Normally I might pause here. I'm going to get some water real quick and because GoToWebinar has these new controls, I'm reluctant to kind of take questions at this point. I will get out of the PowerPoint at the end of the talk and then take questions. But I'm going to continue with the talk for now. Traditional Vedic philosophy talks about 3 types of karma. There's, I think it's called Arbada karma, action already in motion. So sometimes things are happening. You've made some mistakes and you're in a court case and it has to work itself out. It's kind of like you've missed the freeway exit and you just have to keep going until you can get off the next exit. That type of hard karma is harder to change because it's in midstream. It's unraveling. We can do meditation and spiritual practice to lessen the emotional and stressful impact. But then this Sanchita karma, which is accumulated karma, it's all the karma gathered from all past lifetimes. If we learn to analyze the D60 chart, which is called the Shastayamsha chart, which changes every 2 minutes at birth, we actually have a chart of all our past karma. And some of it, not all of it, manifests in every lifetime. Of course, we've chosen certain parts of it, but we can see kind of fascinating patterns there. And then we have a Agami Carter, which is kind of unmanifest karma. It hasn't sprouted, and those are the things that we can see coming in our chart. We can look ahead and make sure we get off at the right expressway exit, and we don't miss our exit. We can do remedies, and sometimes so we can. There is this idea of avert the danger before it arises, and astrology sometimes can do that with certain types of karma. Sometimes in medical karma, you can see that you're going to have a tendency to have certain challenges, and it's coming up in this period. And if you change your diet and exercise and do good things for yourself, you can certainly kind of avert something that may be more difficult. On another level, karma is kind of unfathomable. We don't, studying karma is totally fascinating. I mean, I've gone to people who've read the Akashic records and things like that. And, we don't always know why we've done something and why we're suffering. But usually if something is happening to us, like in a relationship, we've done it to somebody else in a relationship. So often get these victimization situations in relationship. The husband's doing this to me, the husband's doing that to me. But inevitably, you were together, 10 lifetimes and you did it to them before too. And same with parents and children. Our family's karma is particularly kind of challenging sometimes because we're here to get it right, and stuff like that. And sometimes you can see these patterns in the chart. So and you can do remedies for them. Like if you get Venus conjunct Rahu or Mars, and it's particularly in a bad sign, maybe the karma was about spousal abusal in the past, and maybe you have prostate problems now, and maybe you suffer from being, difficult spouses now because you were difficult in the past. And to address this, you could donate to a battered woman shelter because you were a bad husband in the past, something like that. So you can kind of, sometimes you can guess patterns, but we don't, it's still, karma is kind of unfathomable. But the point is that we have to be a better person in this lifetime. And so even if we feel abused or victimized, we have to kind of find a way to move to for forgiveness. Planetary strengths and weaknesses mean something. They reveal purpose and why we're here on the planet. So, um, like I said, weak planets, when we have a weak planet, it means that we haven't learned the lessons of that school. So if you have a weak Saturn, a weak planet may be not just because it's debilitated or in an enemy sign, it may be afflicted by another malefic. Saturn afflicted by Rahu or Ketu is particularly difficult. When we have a weak planet, we have to learn the lessons of that school. Saturn teaches responsibility, hard work, and meditation, and being grounded. And people, for example, with Saturn in Aries, when I've done charts for those people, they're lazy. They don't want to get out of the house and work. They don't like working. They end up working menial jobs, and they hate work. And so they haven't learned that work is part of life. And if they were born with Saturn in Aries, that's what they're supposed to learn. And they have to work 3 times as hard to get out of a house and find a job and learn how to be responsible. But that's how these things work. Anyway, I have I developed this in my evolution. I'm kind of working on this new model of Vedic astrology, which I'm going to bring into the foundation course on evolutionary astrology. And it's the idea, if we have dignity, if the planet has dignity in our chart, let's say it's exalted or it's Mula Trikona, which means it's like the second base place, like Mars is exalted in Capricorn, and it's really its best place is like 0 to 10 degrees Aries. If we have a strong Mars, it means we've learned the lessons of service, and the highest aspect of Mars is service. When Mars is weak, it tends to be, well, we know what happens when people have weak Mars. They tend to be kind of, their ego is out of balance. They can be, they can intrude their ego on other people, and there are all kinds of problems. But we'll go into that. So I developed this evolutionary model, and this is something I kind of cognized from looking at years of Vedic astrology. This is the type of thing I try to bring into my classes, because again, I will teach you the foundational principles, but I'm also teaching advanced principles. So if you know Vedic astrology, my foundation course is an advanced course, really, because I'm teaching at a much richer level. So with Mars, the lessons of Mars, are we willing to see the slippery layers of our ego that wants to be right, look good, and be better than others? So interesting, and I have a whole talk on this on YouTube on Mars and ego. What is Mars? When Mars is weak, it's like it wants to be right. Mars never wants to admit that it's wrong. It's just like, if it admits that it's wrong, it loses its identity. So it always has to be right, and will argue that my politician is better than your politician because I'm right and you're wrong. So we have unfortunately too much of that going on at the moment. Mars also likes to kind of look good. It's about ego. It likes to, it wants to perform in bed. It's very kind of, it likes to, it accomplishes by doing, and it likes to look better than others, because, and then it puffs itself up. So it becomes this one-upsmanship that happens. You've probably had these conversations with people where you tell some moving story to them, and they somehow come up with a one-upmanship. Well, when I was 25, this happened to me, and they somehow one-up you with your moving story, and you hate that. That's a Mars ego. It wants to be better than others. It wants to one-up than others, and these are dark aspects of Mars. The highest aspect of Mars is, Mars governs the military. How can I serve? We say people are in the service. right? Mars, the highest aspect of is service to the king. If we've learned the highest aspects of Mars, like Mars in Aries, um, then we're just, our life should be about service. How can we help others? And, we don't meet too many Mars people that are like that, but it's really a beautiful aspect. Evolutionary model for the sun. Are we willing to grow towards selfless service as the good king and get caught up in power trips and control for self-aggrandizement? So um, the sun is the archetype of the king. And in ancient times, the king was wealthy and he really cared about his people and he wanted to make sure they prospered, and he was the advisor and he would help them in whatever way he could. And it was that selfless service of the sun. It shines everywhere, unconditionally nurturing our world. We would not perish without the sun. Um, the dark side of the sun, when it's weak or afflicted, is it gets caught up in power trips and control for self-aggrandizement. We see this with politicians endlessly these days. Sun conjunct Rahu is a signature for a politician. President Trump has that in his chart. And on some level, I sometimes feel like President Trump wants to be that good king and help people. On another level, it's always about, look what I did. So it's kind of a, it's self-aggrandizement. So, there's the dark aspect of the sun can come up quite a bit. And this is all based on planetary dignity, which we need to study. The moon is about compassion. If we, the universal mother is always there, ever nurturing and giving us everything. I mean, if you know the archetypes of mother divine and things like that, it's just like mother is always giving. And if you had a good mother, and I had a wonderful mother, she gave up everything to cook and do laundry and do everything for her children. It's just this ever nurturing quality of mother. Um, the dark side of the moon, when the moon, you meet people who've had very abusive mothers and cruel mothers, and that means they haven't learned to nurture others in their lives either. The moon is always connected to the mind, and um, people who are enlightened have very clear minds. They don't have excessive thoughts. They're just very quiet minds, and if the mind comes up with thoughts, it's because they need to do something. Most of us are stuck with whirling minds, endlessly waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning, fretting about what our boss said, what's going to happen at work the next day, and in our emotions. So the archetype of the moon is very important. Jupiter, the archetype of Jupiter. Are we willing to act justly with good judgment and maintain moral standards, or do we devolve into material wealth and corruption? So Jupiter in Capricorn, you often see people with that posture is they're unethical. They make a lot of money, but they do it in underhanded ways. Jupiter in Cancer, which we have now, is morally and ethically there, and has good judgment and knows not to do wrong action. Jupiter is also a planet of judgment. How many of you judge others? It's a very common thing. It's part of that Mars, I'm better than you. But Jupiter really needs to kind of move to a higher level of non-judgment. Um, my mother was like that. She had Jupiter in Cancer, and she was just kind of unconditional. She wouldn't talk bad of other people, and she was just so accepting. And it's a really incredible quality. Can we grow toward non-judgment? So we have to eventually, with Jupiter, see our mind that tends to create judgment in order to create these false comparisons to make us better. I mean, we all kind of compare ourselves with others. This is a horrible problem that I still kind of am working on, where we start putting people down. They don't do this, they don't do that. I do this, I do that. And it ends up being this whole thing about, self-righteousness and ego building, and you really have to kind of, it's a really messy thing to get involved in. We have to be, we have to be ultimately compassionate. I mean, one of the most difficult people in my life At some, it was just they caused havoc in my life for 10 years. I found out from their friend that at age 6, their father was a drunk, and they would come home and beat him every day. And the person actually ended up amazingly well, considering, having been that horribly abused and tortured as a 6-year-old. I didn't know that. Inevitably, everybody has a story, and so we have to be non-judgmental. Venus, are we willing to be unconditional and loving in relationships and the expression of beauty, or do we move into criticism, judgment, and separation from others due to our judgment? Again, Venus can also be judgmental and critical. And again, Venus is the signifier for relationships. So have we learned the many slippery lessons about relationship? I have 2 classes on relationship, and it's a fascinating subject. I was part of a relationship institute, and learning to help people accept their spouse is very important. Sometimes when Venus is afflicted, we lose control of the senses through shopping addictions, overindulgence in food and sex for enjoyment and comfort. Mercury, are we willing to support the world ethically with our material skills? Again, Mercury is a business planet, which people forget. It also governs education and childhood education and things like that, but it's actually a business planet. So are we willing to support the world ethically with our material skills, create material abundance for everybody in the world? We have a big heart for creating wealth. So think about Virgo too. I mean, there's kind of the Earth Mother on the deepest level, a strong mercurial person with an exalted Mercury may be very into creating jobs for people and bringing abundance to others, whereas a weak Mercury person may be very kind of out of balance and get caught up in greed, corruption, and selfish accumulation of money for themselves. Other key lesson of Mercury: have we learned how to communicate truthfully and honestly, or do we spread falsehoods for personal ambition? Yeah, I mean, this is a huge thing. Sometimes people get into, and we see this with the media all the time. It's all about lying to, push a political agenda rather than being truthful. And this is a major lesson for Mercury people in the press. Rahu, the North Node, has a good side to it too. Actually, it can be a very spiritual planet. Westerners call it the dragon's head. Do we get caught up in corruption and other unethical behaviors for personal gain and self-aggrandizement and stay stuck in ignorance, or do we realize the futility of the material world and strive to allow our Kundalini to rise into the crown chakra? So the funny thing about Rahu governs Kundalini energy up the central spine. When it's weak, it really gets caught up in self-aggrandizement and unethical behavior, and it's really quite a mess when it's, I have a whole 24-week class on Rahu and Ketu. Very, very important in every chart, governs our desire nature. Or do we allow our Kundalini to rise to the crown chakra and find the divine? So there is a spiritual dimension to Rahu, which people don't ever recognize. Ketu, which is more the spiritual planet, the south node. Do we realize the purpose of our existence is to unite with the divine and help others through selfless service or spiritual wisdom? Ketu again is about service and surrender and devotion. Or do we get caught up in the frustrating web of material success and feel that something is missing? So sometimes Ketu in Taurus, it's where it's debilitated, can be very good at manifesting lots of money and success, but then it doesn't have a sense of what spirituality is. So, anyway, when we study the evolutionary model, it's about planetary strength and weakness. And we'll have to learn how to judge a planetary strength and weakness, and that's a large part of the course. And that may even come up more in the second course, Foundations Part 2. I talked about Mars already, so let's skip this. Okay. So finally, we need real basics about how to run a chart. And for those of you who have no background in Vedic astrology, you need a birth time and a birthplace and a birth city. You need an accurate time. So you have to usually ask people if they have their mother recorded in a baby book, or can they get it from a birth certificate. Hospitals don't always even get the times right. In our advanced classes, we learn rectification. And I also help people with rectification if they're taking my class. Birth times. Some people, it's possible if some people only know their birthday and they don't have any idea, and it's possible to, figure that out, but that's kind of a major undertaking. Um, but we need all those basic things to run a chart. Software, there's a lot of free Vedic software out there. I use Sri Jyotish Star. It's now available for about $10 a month on Google Play Store. Andrew Foss, a dear friend of mine, is a Cambridge PhD graduate in physics, and so he's just a brilliant mathematician, and he got all the math right in Sri Jyotish Star. Not all the programs are always accurate. Jagannatha Hora is actually another freeware program you can download for free, but it's not that user friendly. And all these programs, like any software, take time. We have to know the differences between chart styles, and I'll go over that. There's a southern style, which uses fixed signs, and there's the northern style, which uses fixed houses, and I'll explain that in a minute. I actually did the northern style for about 25 years, and I just switched the last 5 or 6 years to the southern style because it's more useful for Jaimini astrology, and I'll explain that. I will teach you some Jaimini astrology and Jaimini aspects because it's important. But the way the southern style works, so here's my chart. I use my chart for an example all the time. This is the natal chart. It's called the Rashi chart, and this is the Navamsha chart. And so we have the southern style on top, and we have the northern style on the bottom. So in the southern style, now what I tell people get stuck on, well, do you do northern or do you do southern? I can only do northern. It's kind of like, there was a time in grade school that if you were left-handed, they forced you to be right-handed also because they made you wrong for being left-handed, but it made you kind of ambidextrous. I kind of think it's important to know both northern and southern styles. And the reason is if you pick up a book from India, some of them unbelievably will only have southern charts in them, and some of them will only have northern charts in them. I mean, it's like they pretend that, people don't need, there's an ego, there's a difference, the people say, oh, the northern's better than the southern, and the southern's better than the northern. Well, it's a preference. And I'll tell you the secrets of these charts. So the southern chart has fixed signs. So Sagittarius is always in the lower corner, and then it goes in order in the zodiac. Capricorn, Aquarius, the top corner has Pisces. The second house from the left is Aries, Taurus, Gemini. So the Cancer, Leo, Virgo, Libra, Scorpio. So the corners are called dual signs, and they have certain qualities, and they're ruled by Mercury and Jupiter, and then there are other little things that we can learn. But anyway, when we learn Jaimini astrology, there are planetary aspects, and the southern chart is much easier to read the planetary aspects. Now, the secret of the northern chart, they have fixed houses, so they're always putting the first, fourth, seventh, and 10th houses in the center diamond. They're called kendras, and they're considered the most important houses because the first house is our personality and our health. The fourth house is our actually the mind and our happiness, its mother, and things like that. Home. The seventh house is relationship, and the 10th house is status or career. So they always put these in the center diamond so you can highlight them, and then the chart reads counterclockwise. So the first sign, so I'm Scorpio rising, and the line here in the northern chart, in the southern chart, shows that I'm Scorpio rising at 4 degrees 46 minutes, and So in Scorpio, Vedic, the northern chart numbers the signs. So you have to know that 8 is Scorpio. These aren't house numbers. 8 is Scorpio, 9 is Sagittarius, 10 is Capricorn, 11 is Aquarius, 12 is Pisces, 1 is Aries. So the signs are counted from Aries 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay. So, and so it puts, houses are connected to, we'll study a lot about houses and what they mean, but the first house governs your body, your physiology, your personality. It's kind of everything, and everything is the most important planet. And so the northern style puts that at the very top, so that you're paying attention to it, whereas you have to search for the line in the southern style. One of the advantages of the northern style, which was developed, it was supposed to help your intuition to tilt your eyes, because the diagonals kind of force you to kind of move beyond into the realm of being a seer, or and so the diagonals kind of are supposed to do that. And there are a lot of people that like the northern style. I will I tend to favor the southern style now, and I will use it more in class. But if there are people that need the northern style, I will put the dual charts up here, like I have done that. Okay, so that's the differences between the two charts, and what we have to know how to create a chart, and I'll show you. We'll learn that too. We talk about the difference between sidereal and tropical a little bit at the beginning, and there's a lot of things we can teach you, but it's kind of I don't want to go too late today. We've gone an hour, and I want to take time for some questions. So I'm going to see if I can get GoToWebinar up and unmute you all. Let's see. Okay, so I'm going to see if I can. I'm still GoToWebinar just came up with a new system, which is a little bit more like Zoom. It's going to make you easier to hopefully. I think I can. They just came out with a new version June 1st, and I just used it yesterday. So I have to find out how to so you can ask questions. I think it's under share. Controls. Okay, I can give you tools. Timer, leave, captions, pop out. Okay, I apologize. I did see this yesterday, and should be under mic. Audio settings. I think it's. Okay, yeah, that's where it's kind of buried here someplace. I think it's here. Audio settings. I apologize. I'm still. The good news is it's easier for you to take control of the mic now on the new system. The bad news is I have to kind of enable it so that you can microphone, speakers. I think I found it under session. So I'm just out of curiosity, allow mic. Okay, so now, okay, I just turned on your mics. So if you want to ask a question, you should be able to do that now. And I've got the mic on. I'm leaving the candor off. Okay, so your mics are, so somebody in one of my students, can you do a test, and like Emma or somebody, can you show me, can you do a test and see if the mic's working? And I do apologize. I had this working yesterday. Oh, maybe it's here. Okay. Here it is.
Barry, can you hear me?
Yeah. Okay, good. So I am seeing people, and your mics, I'm going to, okay, Debbie. By the way, Debbie, do you want to share your experience taking classes from me with the other people who are here? Or Daniela, would you like to share your experience with
I'm a newcomer to Barry's classes. I've only taken his Varga classes. I have taken other classes with other astrologers. I find that, first of all, Barry talks in language I can understand, in words that I can understand, and he is very, very patient, and continually asks, are you understanding a topic? Do you have questions? And is very involved with the students in his class. I have never had a teacher, an astrology teacher, who is so involved in making sure their students were doing well.
Thank you. Now I'm going to unmute you. Now, I think, Carol, it looks like you have a question. I'm trying to unmute you. I don't know why. I'm so sorry. They have totally new controls on GoToWebinar, and the people that are my students got the panelist mode, so they were able to mute me. So let me see if I can. Usually, I just unmute, so I don't know why. Do apologize. Filters by name. Mute everybody. Okay, so let's allow everybody to unmute. Allow everyone to unmute. Yes. So I have unmuted you all. So it may be that you don't have questions. Carol, it seems like you have a question. And I am so sorry that these new controls are just a little bit beyond. Yesterday I clicked on it and it just unmuted people. So let's try this again. Select all. No. Okay.
We're unmuted, Barry.
Okay, good. Okay, great. So whoever would like to ask a question first, I'm here to answer them. Again, sometimes people don't have questions and they're shy. Let me tell you a little bit while if you're thinking up any questions, let me tell you a little bit about the logistics of the class. Class is $395. A lot of my colleagues charge $1,800 or $2,500. I don't know, for these foundation classes. So I'm very reasonable because my income comes from other sources and this is my passion. You can sign up on appliedvedicastrology.com. Under the webinar tab, and at the end of the talk, you'll get a copy of the lecture, and it'll have a link to sign up for the class. The class is going to start on Wednesday, June 24th from 2 to 4 p.m. There's a small chance I could do it Sunday morning at 9 a.m., which is also quite early for people. I usually have a lot of stuff going on Sundays, but it's possible if I have 10 people who can only take the class on Sunday morning, I will move it from Wednesday afternoon to Sunday morning. A lot of retired people who take classes. I have people in England who take classes. So at the moment, we can go Wednesday 2 to 4. But if I get and the courses are always recorded. If you miss a class, you get the PowerPoints. You get 3 of my books to study from. You'll find I'm the most generous person about giving out knowledge that you'll ever meet. I've had teachers who, if you study with them for 5 years, maybe they'll throw you a crumb. But I give out everything, and I'm just extremely generous in that respect. So going back to questions, Daniela, do you want to share anything about doing classes with me? Or I don't mean to put you on the spot, but
Yeah, I have found, Barry, your classes, you do go very deep, but also at the same time you have such a way of explaining things to where it really clicks in. I find it very um, you have a very clear way of expressing yourself, and at the same time very deep and grasp, the layperson is able to grasp it. So I've really enjoyed your classes both on financial astrology and what I've learned just in general with the Vedic tradition. It's been wonderful.
okay, thank you. Tommy, do you have a question? I can't tell. Go ahead. When people have still getting used to the controls here, and I hopefully I'll have to read the manual now that they have new controls. Carol, also, do you have a question? Also, I don't know. Okay. Emma, did you want to share anything about taking classes from me?
Yeah, I've been taking many of your classes over the years, and also I sometimes will purchase some of the recordings of the previous classes. I would say Barry is the most knowledgeable and generous teacher I've ever met, and he does care about everyone. And I think learning his class, learning from him is like is the like my luckiest moment in life, because I've been really interested in Jyotish, but I have a lot of questions. Like, he's always ready to answer, and he gives the best recommendation when it comes to books. I'm actually holding one right now as I'm talking. He was talking about it last week, so I really appreciate Barry. And even though this is a foundation, I've been learning Jyotish for many years, but I still, like considering taking it because it's very, like, I can't resist it.
Yeah, that's what I want to encourage people. For some of you who think you know Vedic astrology, I mean, if you study with me, you'll suddenly know Vedic astrology on an advanced level, because I find that there's just a lot of, I mean, you can take a class and you learn Jupiter, it has 5, 7, 5, 9 trines, from it, or that Mars has, you can learn all these stupid rules from just about anybody, but what do Mars squares really mean? Or what does a Jupiter trine really mean? Or what does an aspect from Mercury really mean? There's people don't teach you that. And there's so many subtle things that people don't teach you anymore. I mean, so I like to teach things on a basic level. And hopefully you can tell from today's talk that I have a very deep and rich spiritual understanding of Vedic astrology. It's not just, oh, I'm a victim of Mars, I'm angry, I'm going to have accidents because Mars is aspecting my ascendant. Yeah, you can learn that anywhere, but no, I gave you what Mars is really about. It's about ego. It's about being right. It's trying to better other people. Are you willing to learn to move beyond those childhood qualities of Mars and to be of service to other people? So I'm really wanting to teach Vedic astrology on a very deep level. And I should call this advanced foundations, because it's, so for those of you who think you know Vedic astrology, and I'm glad that you do, or if you want to learn from the very beginning and just on a very deep level, please come study with me. This is my most, I don't make a huge amount of money teaching astrology, and I have income from other sources, but it's my absolute passion. I mean, I'm here to be a spiritual teacher and a Vedic astrology teacher, and I've got Jupiter and Ketu in the 8th house in Gemini. I mean, it couldn't be any clearer about my life purpose. So thank you for supporting me to help me live it. If you have any other questions, go ahead, please.
I absolutely second everything that Emma said. And I am just filled with gratitude that I get to have you as my teacher.
Oh, thank you. Well,
and thank you for explaining how to read a northern chart, because I have never before been able to figure them out. So thank you.
Okay, great. Yeah. God forbid you ever have to learn the Eastern chart. Oh my God, I still can't use it.
But the point is, even if you think, oh, I already know everything, look at what you can learn when you're not expecting to learn anything.
Right. Thank you. That's a beautiful thought. And I that's very true. The ocean of Vedic astrology is absolutely endless. Somebody else had a question? Go ahead.
I just want to second with what Debbie just said. I'm really curious about, what I can discover from your foundation class, because I know you have vast knowledge of Jyotish. You definitely is going to introduce some secrets as you're teaching those foundations. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you, Emma. It'd be good to have you. Yeah, it's good to have. Like I said, I often have people who know Vedic astrology taking my basic classes because, and this is not a basic class really, but it is from the beginning. But yeah, I really do teach on a very deep level. Other questions? So one of the nice things that's happened, sometimes people have trouble with payments. Stripe now is hooked up to Klarna. It's not Clara, it's Klarna. Klarna is the new, pay an installment system that went up. And it allows you to pick 2 installment or 3 installments, sometimes for no interest. Sometimes if you want 18 installments, you can, it lets you, gives you interest on it, so do your credit cards at 30%. But for people who have financial payment problems, we now have Klarna on our website connected. You just have to choose it when you check out with Stripe. So if money is an issue, everybody can find a payment plan that they like with Klarna. And if you have any special needs, like you're a retired senior and you're living on Social Security, and you talk to me. I mean, I'm here to help everybody. I'm not, I don't do this to make zillions of dollars of money. Okay, so final thoughts from anybody?
I just want to thank you. This is Michelle. I'm looking forward to studying with you.
Thank you, Michelle, for being here. Yeah, I'm very excited that you're going to be in the class. Michelle's an old buddy of mine from about 20 or 30 years ago, or maybe more. I think I met you in 1992. I don't know, 1994. I think I met you in Vancouver in 1994. Anyway, amazing. And I'm just curious. For those, I tried to present this material in a very unique way with so I'm hoping that all of you learned something new today, because these are my deepest thoughts about Vedic astrology, and I don't know anybody that offers them, and I'm just wondering if anybody recognized and learned something amazing today, because I tried to put together something unique.
I did. I learned that we can actually talk to the planets, and you when you were talking about talking to Saturn and commanding, that that you wanted Saturn to leave, or it just it resonated very deeply. So thank you.
Oh, nice. Yeah, Saturn, you can go now. You can go. Anybody else want to share anything that moved them today? Okay. Well, again, thank you for joining me today, and I'm sure you'll be getting some follow-up. You'll get an email from GoToWebinar with a replay link. If you missed the talk, the replay link will be sent to you, and the replay message has information on how to sign up for the course, and you can always email me at barry@appliedvedicastrology.com and visit my website. I'm very available, and I look forward to having you in my class. And if by some chance you're interested and you can, you just really need Sunday morning at 9 a.m., let me know. If we have like 10 people like that, I will move the class there. That's time I spend with my wife, and she's not going to be happy if I run off to teach astrology at 9, but I have a higher service calling sometimes. Anyway, I'm going to end this call, and sometimes.
Thank you, Barry. Bye.